My name is Robert Langley, and I'm 64 years old. I live alone now, in a modest two-bedroom house on the edge of a quiet suburb in New Hampshire. It's the same house I moved into with my wife Ellen 37 years ago when we were still young and full of plans, before the sickness, before the silence, before everything changed. The house has creaky floorboards and a chimney that needs repairing, and in the springtime, the dogwood tree in the front yard blossoms into a quiet kind of pink that makes me pause every time I step outside. It's not grand, but it's home. It always has been. Ellen passed away when our daughter Joanna was 6 years old. It was cancer, fast, cruel, and completely unforgiving. I still remember that last week at the hospital, the way Ellen held my hand even when she was barely conscious, murmuring only one thing over and over again: take care of her. Please take care of her. And I did. I had no idea what I was doing at first. No parenting books prepared me to be both father and mother. No article on single fatherhood taught me how to braid hair before school picture day, or how to hold her through her first heartbreak when she was 16 and crying into my shirt. But I learned. You learn quickly when you love someone enough. I worked two jobs for years. During the day, I was a line supervisor at a local furniture plant. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. At night, I picked up shifts as a janitor at the community college. There were years when I barely slept more than 4 hours a night, but I never missed a parent-teacher meeting. I never forgot a birthday. I learned how to make French toast the way she liked it, crispy at the edges, soft in the middle, with just a touch of cinnamon. I showed up for every school recital, every basketball game, every award ceremony, even when I had to take my work uniform off in the car and change into something more presentable. Joanna was always brilliant, sharp as a tack, with a quiet, intense focus that reminded me of her mother. She loved books and animals, and puzzles that took hours to finish. I kept every report card, every drawing, every little note she ever wrote me. I still have them in a box in my closet, wrapped in a flannel blanket she used as a child. When she was accepted into college on a scholarship, I cried for a whole evening. Not because she was leaving, but because I was proud, so damn proud. I had saved every dollar I could to help her, took extra shifts, sold the car Ellen and I bought together in our 30s. I told Joanna not to worry about anything. "I've got you," I said, "always." And I did. When her first apartment lease came through, I was the one who co-signed it. When the heater broke that first winter, I drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to fix it myself. When she called after her first breakup in college, sobbing and heartbroken, I stayed on the line with her for 6 straight hours. People sometimes ask me why I didn't remarry, why I never moved on. I never had a good answer. Maybe it was loyalty to Ellen. Maybe it was the way Joanna filled my entire world. Maybe I just didn't want to. My life was full, even if it was hard. That's the kind of man I am. Not loud, not flashy, just there, quietly, consistently, and with everything I had. I used to think that when the day came, I would walk her down the aisle, that I would stand at the back of a sunlit chapel, wearing my one good suit, and watch her take those steps with pride in every heartbeat, that I'd place her hand in her husband's and whisper something only a father could say. I had imagined that day 1,000 times. But what happened wasn't that. It started with a quiet unease, a shift in tone I didn't quite notice until it had already settled in. Joanna had been distant that year. Not rude, not cold, just busy. Her job at the firm had picked up, and she said there were deadlines, late hours, business trips. I didn't pry. I trusted her. That's what you do when your child becomes an adult. You give them space. But something deeper had changed. The calls became shorter, the visits fewer. Conversations stayed on the surface. No more long talks about work dilemmas or weekend plans. When I asked if everything was all right, she'd smile and say, "Of course, Dad. Just hectic." I only found out about the engagement through a neighbor, Mrs. Hensley. She came by one afternoon, holding a tray of lemon bars like she always did in spring, and chirped, "Oh, you must be thrilled. Saw Joanna's engagement post online. What a gorgeous ring." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't seen the post. I hadn't even known she was seeing someone seriously. I felt foolish, like I had been standing in the wrong room, while my own life changed on the other side of a wall. That evening, I stared at the screen for a long time before typing her name into the search bar. There it was, a photo of Joanna and a man I had never met, hands intertwined, smiles wide, her eyes alight with joy. The caption, "Can't wait to start forever with you." There were hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, congratulations from coworkers, college friends, neighbors, people I hadn't heard her mention in years, but not one word to me. I called the next morning. She answered, her voice bright and composed. "Hi, Dad." "I saw the news," I said. A pause. "Oh, right. Yes. Congratulations." "Thank you." Another pause. "It's going to be small, just a quiet thing." I waited. Silence stretched between us. "Will I be there?" I asked gently, not wanting to sound accusatory. She sighed, the kind of sigh that says the decision is already made. "Dad, I need you to understand something. It's not, it's not personal. It's just, Tom and I, we're doing something very intimate. Just close friends. No pressure. No drama. His family is really sensitive to emotional tension." "Tension? You know what I mean. You're intense sometimes. You have this presence. I don't want anything to feel heavy." I didn't reply. She tried to soften it. "It's just a day, Dad. What matters is everything you've done for me already. You've been everything. You don't need to be at the wedding to prove that." But she was wrong. That day wasn't just a day. It was the day. The one I'd carried in my heart for nearly 30 years. The one I'd earned with 1,000 tiny acts of love and sacrifice. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I thanked her for the honesty, told her I wished her happiness, and hung up. Then I sat at the kitchen table until nightfall, staring at nothing. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old clock Ellen once picked out. I realized something profound then. I was no longer a part of her story, not in the way I once was. Somewhere along the path, I had become a chapter she quietly closed. But if she wanted quiet, she would get it. I didn't need to be in the photo to leave a mark on the day. The week before the wedding, I found myself waking up earlier than usual. Old habits, maybe. I'd make coffee and sit in the back porch rocker, watching the squirrels dart across the lawn and the sun cast golden stripes over the dew-soaked grass. I wasn't angry, not really. Anger is noisy and hot, and what I felt was the opposite. Quiet, cold, like standing in a room after everyone has left. I didn't tell anyone. Not Mrs. Hensley, not my friend Jack from the plant, not even my sister Ruth, who called every Sunday like clockwork. I didn't want pity. I didn't want advice. I wanted to understand something on my own, what it meant to be erased, and what I would do about it. On Thursday afternoon, 3 days before the ceremony, I drove into town under the pretense of doing errands. I passed the bakery I used to take Joanna to when she was little, the one with the buttery apple turnovers she adored. I passed the bookstore where she bought her first novel with her own allowance. Memories hit like small, precise bruises. The wedding was to be held at the Riverview Manor, an elegant event hall by the river, built inside a restored 19th century farmhouse. I had passed it before, never given it much thought. But now I pulled into the gravel parking lot, sat in my truck for 10 minutes, and stared at the building like it held the answers to a question I hadn't yet asked aloud. Inside, the receptionist greeted me with a soft smile. I told her I was considering the venue for a friend's surprise, a bit of a fib, but she didn't press. I asked if I could take a look, maybe see the main hall. She led me through a wide corridor into a beautiful room lit by antique chandeliers. Cream-colored drapes lined the windows. Tables stood stacked along the walls, waiting to be arranged. It smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paint. I stood still for a long time. Then I asked, as if casually, "Has the full balance been paid yet?" "For the event this weekend, Joanna Langley?" She clicked around on her screen. "No, not yet. Just a deposit. But we expect the remainder by Friday." I nodded slowly. "What if someone else covered it?" Quietly, the receptionist blinked. "We do allow that. Sometimes a benefactor. Parents. Grandparents. It happens. Could it be anonymous? Certainly, we just issue a receipt with whatever message you'd like. Would you like to make a payment now? I took out my wallet. I didn't ask the amount. I already knew from a little research the week before. I handed her my card and watched as she tapped the keys. It was a quiet moment. Nothing flashy, no ceremony. When she asked what should appear on the receipt, I paused, then said simply, "From the man who raised the bride." I didn't leave my name. When I stepped back outside, the sun had begun to set. The air had cooled. I felt steadier, not happier, not vindicated, but firm, like a stone underfoot. I knew I wouldn't be invited. I wouldn't make a speech or dance the father-daughter waltz, but I would be there, in my own way, the way I'd always been. Saturday arrived with a sky so crisp and blue it almost felt staged, the kind of morning that demanded celebration. I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, just a clean, ironed shirt, pressed trousers, and the brown jacket Ellen once said made me look distinguished. I packed a small thermos of coffee, tucked a sandwich into a napkin, and drove into town with no destination except the one I could not enter. The Riverview Manor sat elegantly beneath the early autumn sun, its white shutters gleaming, the surrounding trees tinged with amber and rust. Guests had already begun to arrive. Cars filled the lot, and laughter drifted from the open foyer. I parked farther down the road, by the riverbank, beneath a tall oak whose leaves quivered in the breeze. From there, I could see the back terrace. Large French doors opened onto a garden area lined with white chairs. The arch at the altar was wrapped in eucalyptus and cream roses. I recognized the florist's signature arrangement from town. People moved in soft procession, dressed in grays and navy blues. Glasses clinked. Someone tested the sound system. The murmur of anticipation built like a gentle tide. I sipped my coffee and watched. I didn't feel bitter, just removed. Like I was watching a play I had helped write, only to be asked to stay behind the curtain. When Joanna appeared, time slowed. She stepped through the doorway like a painting come to life. Her dress was classic, ivory satin, modest neckline, delicate lace sleeves. Her hair, pinned up with tiny pearls, shimmered when she moved. For a second, she turned toward the river, toward where I stood. I don't know if she saw me. If she did, she gave no sign. By her side was a man in a dark suit. Her stepfather, I assumed. Tom's father, maybe. He offered his arm and she took it. Together they began the walk down the aisle. I knew every step of her gait, the slight bend in her right knee, the way she tugged at her wrist when nervous. I knew she was nervous. I could see it in her posture. I wanted in that moment to remember her not just as a bride, but as the girl who once insisted on having peanut butter sandwiches cut diagonally, who once fell asleep on my chest during fireworks, who called me her hero in a third-grade essay. The ceremony was short, beautiful, efficient. The efficient kept it light. The guests laughed in the right places. There were no tears, at least not the kind I expected. Then, just as the crowd began to relax into cocktails and chatter, a hush spread across the terrace. The wedding coordinator stepped forward with a white envelope in hand. She approached the microphone and cleared her throat. "Before we move to the reception," she said, "there is one final gift, sent by someone who could not attend." All eyes turned toward her. Joanna tilted her head, puzzled. Tom reached for her hand. The envelope was opened. Inside, a check, folded neatly, and a single line written in firm, neat handwriting. "From the man who raised the bride," quietly. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. The coordinator didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Joanna's face changed, not dramatically, not enough for the guests to notice. But I saw it, a small shift in her eyes, like recognition had arrived, late, but impossible to ignore. I stepped back from the tree. My thermos was empty, my sandwich untouched. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for the music. I didn't need to see the first dance. She had her day, and I had mine. And somewhere in the heart of that celebration, a quiet truth had landed like a feather on a polished floor. Not loud, but impossible not to notice. Sunday morning came slow and heavy, the kind of morning that doesn't ask for attention, just endurance. I sat by the window with my newspaper unopened, the same mug of coffee slowly going cold in my hand. The house felt too quiet, Not unfamiliar, but aware of itself, like it knew something important had passed just beyond its walls. I didn't check social media, didn't turn on the news. I just waited, uncertain for what. By midday, the call came. Not from Joanna, from the venue. "Mr. Langley?" a woman's voice asked. "I believe you requested anonymity, but the coordinator insisted we confirm that the check was received and presented per your request. And, well, I wanted you to know it made an impact." I thanked her, that was all. Just a quiet thank you and a request not to be contacted again. Then I went into my closet. I opened the old wooden box where I kept pieces of my life that hadn't fit anywhere else. Joanna's baby socks, Ellen's letters, a lock of hair from Joanna's first haircut. I added the receipt from the wedding payment and tucked it inside with the rest. Later that evening, I took a walk. The air had turned brisk. Fallen leaves crackled underfoot. I passed the elementary school where I once waited outside in the cold just to surprise Joanna with hot cocoa after her winter play. I passed the pharmacy where she picked out birthday cards for Ellen every year until Ellen was gone. I wondered what she thought when she saw the check. Did she recognize my handwriting? Did she feel warmth, shame, gratitude? Did it matter? In truth, the note hadn't been for her. It had been for me. It had been a way to finish something, to draw a line in ink beneath 30 years of unspoken sacrifices and say, "You were never alone." Maybe someday she'll tell her children that someone once gave her a wedding without standing beside her. Maybe she'll frame that note, or maybe she'll toss it away and pretend it never happened. But I know, I was the one who bought her first shoes, who sat through lice checks and teenage tempers, who read every college essay and mailed care packages stuffed with cookies and quarters for the laundromat. And on the day she stood surrounded by people clapping and toasting and smiling, it was my quiet signature that made it all happen. The check wasn't a transaction, it was a ledger closing, and the final line read, "From the man who raised the bride," quietly. The days that followed passed without ceremony, no phone calls, no knocks at the door. The world moved forward, indifferent and unbothered. I ran errands, I raked the leaves. I sat at the diner on Main Street with a cup of black coffee and nodded to familiar faces. Not once did I mention the wedding. There was nothing to say. A part of me had imagined she might call, even if just to ask, to confirm, to reach for an answer she already knew. But the phone stayed silent, sitting on its cradle like an ornament from another era. I told myself it was better this way, that the note said all I needed to say, that anything more would have complicated what was already fragile. But silence, real silence, not just the absence of noise, but the presence of intentional distance, has a weight. It fills rooms. It lingers on pillows. It changes the way sunlight hits the floor. By Thursday, I decided to drive past the river. I didn't plan to stop. I just wanted to see the place again, now that it was no longer dressed in flowers and ceremony. The manor stood quiet, its windows blank and unlit. The parking lot was empty. The archway had been taken down. I pulled into the same spot beneath a tall oak, engine ticking in the cool air. I wasn't there for long, just long enough to realize I wasn't waiting anymore. On the way back, I stopped at the grocery store, picked up apples, milk, a new tin of coffee. And then I saw her, Joanna. She was across the parking lot, unlocking her car, her coat collar pulled up against the wind, her hair loose. She hadn't noticed me. Not yet. I didn't move. Just stood beside my truck, keys in hand. And then she turned. Our eyes met across the space. A few seconds, maybe more. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Her mouth parted slightly as if to speak, but no sound came. Her hand tightened on the door handle. I saw a flicker there, of guilt or memory or something heavier. I nodded, just once. The kind of nod that says, "It's all right, even when it isn't." Then I got in my truck, started the engine, and left. Not in anger, not in heartbreak, in peace. Because there are moments when silence is not a punishment. It is a choice, a way of honoring what was without insisting it return. She saw me. That was enough, for both of us. There's a photograph on my mantle. It's the only one I have from that day. I didn't take it, of course. Someone must have posted it online afterward, And Ruth, my sister, printed it for me without asking, slipped it into a card with no note. She meant well. In the photo, Joanna stands in profile beneath the wedding arch. The sun halos her hair, and she's laughing, free, unguarded. There's a blur of people around her, guests clapping, faces turned toward the couple. But in that moment, the camera caught her alone, unaware. I keep it not out of spite, but memory, because I remember every version of her. The baby in my arms, slick with tears and milk. The girl on the porch steps reading aloud to her stuffed animals. The teenager who slammed her bedroom door, then whispered apologies through the crack an hour later. The young woman who called me crying the day her scholarship came through. Not from sadness, but disbelief that good things were finally happening. And the bride I didn't walk down the aisle. That one too. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not pushing harder, if I should have made a scene, demanded a seat, fought for my place in the sun. But I was never a man of noise. I was the one behind the camera, behind the curtain, behind the steering wheel on late-night drives from school recitals. I was the one who taped spelling words to the fridge and fixed the porch steps at 2 a.m. when no one noticed. I didn't raise Joanna to see me. I raised her so she could stand on her own. And she did. Perhaps too well. I don't know if she ever speaks of me to others, if she tells the story of her wedding and includes the envelope. Maybe it became a footnote, or maybe she folded the receipt into a drawer she never opens. That's all right. Some gifts aren't meant to be understood, only felt. Life now is slower. I volunteer at the local library. I still fix things around the neighborhood when asked. Kids call me Mr. Langley. I find that comforting. Ellen used to say the best kind of legacy is a quiet one, passed hand to hand without needing applause. Joanna called once, a month after the wedding. The call lasted under a minute, just to check in. We talked about the weather. I didn't mention the check. She didn't ask. But at the end, she said, I got the note. Just that. And in her voice, something old, something small and warm. I know, I said. I didn't need more. That's how it ends, I think. Not with grand reconciliation or fireworks, but with quiet recognition. A thread that, while frayed, never quite broke. There's no plaque for the work I did, no spotlight, no toast. But somewhere in the middle of that wedding, amidst the music and flowers and laughter, I left a mark, and she saw it forever.